And then something would happen and it would spark a wildfire. And I would say, why me? What is happening? Why does this always happen to me? Well, it's because my life is the condition for a wildfire. Welcome to the Bears and Lions podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Vaught, and this is the podcast where we challenge our future by viewing our past. I'm a firm believer that our greatest future will always lie within the correct view of our past. Because when we look at our past, yeah, there's some dark and scary moments in there, and there's probably some things that we haven't even dealt with yet, and we're going to find those out at some point in time. But when you look at your past with a correct view, I think that you see how strong you actually are because you've overcome things and you've gone through extreme challenges and you've come out the other side. And it gives you confidence in knowing that you are exactly who you are because of some of the things that you've gone through. And it gives you confidence in knowing that you can step into your future with a ferocity and joy. And that's exactly what I want to do today. And in today's conversation, I want to talk to you about mental wildfires. Now, I think we've seen in the recent past a couple different wildfires. We saw some in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, as well as most recently the Hawaii wildfires. And they're devastating, right? They just consume everything without any type of really boundaries. They just go. Whatever the wind is going that way, it's going to just burn everything. And they can start naturally from lightning strikes, but they most often start from unattended fires. Sometimes they can start by improperly discarded cigarettes, whatever that might be. But it all comes down to condition, right? If it's the right condition, the heat and one little spark can ignite it and just go. And honestly, they can spread extremely fast. And when you think of, okay, how fast? Up to 14 miles per hour. And you think, okay, that's not like super fast. I drive down the road at like 30 miles an hour. We're talking engulfing fire that just burns everything. Imagine 14 miles an hour. Within 1 hour, your whole block is gone. That's how quickly it can burn. So it's wild because it doesn't have any boundaries and it just goes and it'll just burn everything without it doesn't have a mind of its own. So it just burns everything, right? And it raises it to the ground. And we've seen how just damaging that can be. We've seen that the aftermath, the cars, right? Like metal cars just melted in the streets. And I think of mental wildfires and how often this can actually happen. And we don't necessarily view it as this, but I've gone through some moments and I was really doing some research over the last few weeks of the oftentimes of those mental wildfires where it's like, how did this even happen? Right? Have you ever had like a mental wildfire where you've had a friend group or a relationship or something, a loved one, and all of a sudden one comment just it engulfs into like, what is happening? Like arguments left and right. Maybe it's friendships that die or end. Maybe it's relationships that one conversation, all of a sudden you both realize this isn't working out. And it can be really devastating. It can be extremely devastating and it can burn through everything in your life, right? It can impact your work. It can impact your job, your school, your transportation. It can impact your house environment, especially if it's like with a roommate. It can change everything. And it can start from just this small spark, right? This one small argument or this one small thing. And it's all because the conditions are right. And maybe you're really tired. Maybe you're hungry that day. Maybe it's something that you said that really shouldn't have been said. Whatever it might have been, that starts this mental wildfire where it's like, oh my goodness. And I've seen this happen in job places and workplaces where it's like one person is, everybody's working really hard and it's great, but then one person says something who, doesn't exactly realize that somebody else can hear what they're saying. And then the next thing you know, everybody's at each other and everything's on fire. It's that meme, right? Where this is fine, but the house is on fire. I think we've all experienced something like this. And you may be saying to yourself, yes, I have experienced that. I know exactly what you're talking about. Maybe you're somebody who there's a wildfire in your life right now. So maybe you're going through a breakup. Maybe you're in a relationship that looks like it's leaning towards a breakup where everything's just on fire. I remember I started dating somebody in a friend group. We had this really close friend group, about 5 of us, and it was really cool. And I started dating one of them. That relationship ended and it just engulfed everything. all of that friend group split. And to this day, none of us talk to each other. And I mean, we were so close. We would do everything together. I mean, it was like friends. I mean, we literally would do everything together. And of course, that ended that entire friend group. And it changed the trajectory of my life, to be honest. But it happens. And maybe you've experienced that. Maybe you are experiencing that, where it doesn't matter what job you go to, you still experience that wildfire. Maybe you have a new relationship, but it still burns at the same point. Maybe you have friends, but at some point, those struggles come around. And at the end of the day, you just burn out. And what I really have determined and thought of is, I think our mental conditions, we actually create the conditions that allow those mental wildfires to go just at the spark, and it will engulf. We have the right fuel. We have the right conditions. It's maybe a dry season. And I looked at those conditions too. And what exactly does the condition, determine? And I just looked at regular wildfires, dry seasons with no rain, a lot of debris and a lot of dead things around that can be easily ignited and burned. And then there's a buildup of brush and things and debris and stuff that shouldn't be there. Just clutter, essentially, that is there. And those are really the main ones, is if everything's dead and dry on the ground, and then all of a sudden you introduce heat and a fire or a spark, the next thing you know, all of that debris can just ignite and immediately go into this engulfing fire that will burn everything that's there, including the live trees and the living organisms and things like that. And I think it's so interesting because mentally, how many of us have experienced that or have those conditions, right? Maybe we're in a dry spell. I see this all the time. I just need a break. I need a win. Please. Maybe we're in a dry spell where we feel like we just need a win. And maybe we've had a win recently, but it was really just a sprinkle and it didn't really do anything. It didn't wet the ground. It just kind of was like, oh, yay, but nothing really happened. Or maybe there is an amount of dead pieces that are around us, right? Tree limbs that have fallen. Mentally, I could look at past friendships or breakups that haven't healed correctly. Maybe we can't get over past mistakes. Maybe we're blaming ourselves for things that really it's just getting in our way. And we hold ourselves accountable saying, you did this, you did this, you did this, instead of building something new, saying, okay, I did this, but I'm going to start building on that. I'm going to actually start making a new habit. I'm going to change something. And I've experienced that in my life quite a bit. Maybe there's some buildup of brush and debris where it's literally just you filling your time, right? I can't be alone, so I need to hang out with people. Hey, there's people, and I'm going to go hang out with them. What do you guys do? Well, we're not necessarily doing anything beneficial, but sure, you can hang out with us. So you just fill your time with people, or maybe you smoke to relax, right? I just need to get my mind off things, or it helps me out. I hear so many people, and I used to smoke cigarettes, and I never really smoked weed, but I hear so many people who's like, I need to smoke to exist. Like, I need to smoke because it helps me with anxiety and things like that. And I'm like, look, I have no doubt that it does, because medically it does. And I understand medical marijuana, and I've done a lot of different studies on it. But at what point do you get off of the medicine? Right? At what point do you get to a point, where you can actually deal with life without the medicine? Because the goal of medicine is to wean you back into reality, right? If you're sick, you take medicine to get you back to where you're healthy, right? It would be weird if every morning you wake up and I just take cough syrup every morning. I take Dayquil every day. Doesn't matter what it is. I just wake up and take. No, there's no reason to take it. You don't take Tylenol if you don't have a headache, right? Like, who would wake up one morning and say, I'm feeling great, I'm gonna pop 2 Tylenol? That's where I think of, like, maybe there's some things that you're just filling your life. Maybe you drink to forget. This is me. Definitely me. I've done this in my life a couple different times, where it's like, I just need to drink, so I'm doing something. I'm bored and I need to do something, so I'm going to eat and I'm going to drink. Maybe the debris in your mind is free time. I know so many people who all ask them, what are you doing this weekend? I'm going to drink, I'm going to sleep. I'm going to eat, I'm going to sleep. And I get that. And I'm not judging anybody who does this, by the way, because I have definitely done this more than a few times in my life. But I do think it's interesting is if you want something new, if you want to change, if you want a different outcome, then you're going to have to do something different. And I think it's very important. So if you're sleeping your day away when you could be applying yourself to learning something or doing something, if you say, yeah, I really want to post on social media more, but you're spending all of your free time drinking and sleeping, you're not going to be posting on social media, which means you're not practicing that skill. And whenever you actually do start, you're going to be behind the game. And it's something that it can be substituted for everything, right? So that's clutter that creates a condition of that wildfire. And really what I realized, all of those, by the way, all of those things that I just named off were things that I saw in my life. This is not me calling out somebody specifically. This is me calling out myself. I've seen this in my life over the last few years in different moments throughout my life where I wanted something different. I really wanted something different, but I was creating the exact conditions that it would take to make that wildfire. And then something would happen and it would spark a wildfire. And I would say, why me? What is happening? Why does this always happen to me? Well, it's because my life is the condition for a wildfire. All it needs is a spark and it's on fire. So don't be surprised when mental wildfires happen in your life, especially when you've been the person who's created those conditions for them to essentially burn you from the inside out. So if your condition of life is setting up, if your condition is setting yourself up for that burning, I promise you, every single spark is going to start a wildfire. So you may say, okay, so what do I do? How do I develop a better condition? And I think that is where it's really important, where discipline will come into play. But also, I looked at just regular wildfires. How do they prevent wildfires? In most cases, is they actually burn. And this is wild. I looked up the wildlife reserves in a bunch of different areas and a bunch of different state wildlife preserves that do this. They'll do what's called the prescribed burning. And prescribed burning is really unique. There's two different ways that they do it, but it's really unique because it's super helpful for the area and the environment and the ecosystem because it'll recycle nutrients back into the ground. And so the ground will be super healthy for like trees and everything. It'll promote the growth of all the trees and the plants that are in that ecosystem that should be there. It'll also minimize the invasive insects and unwanted species. So maybe there's a bunch of dead brush and just dead stuff all on the ground. And so there's not room for the bigger animals to move around. So they start moving out of that area. And because they move out of that, invasive species that just overtake it will just overwhelm that area. So then it'll start killing the trees. But it also reduces the chance of wildfire. So when they go through, they have two different ways of doing it. They'll do pile burning, where what it sounds like, they'll pile everything together, all the dead trees, brush, leaves, etc., plants, anything that's just in the way. They'll pile it up, they'll burn it. The most common one, though, is broadcast burning. And this is more common because they'll actually plan this prescribed burning like 6 months in advance is what I saw one of them, one of their plans they were going through. And I watched a YouTube video on it, and they were talking about how 6 months in advance, they'll be like, this is the conditions we need. This is the tract of land that we're going to go through. We need to be able to burn X, Y, and Z and follow through. So they'll have firefighters out there, and they'll burn along a tract of land, and they'll burn in multiple different areas to essentially just consume all of the dead stuff on the ground. So dead tree branches, dead trees that have fallen over, dead brush, piles of clutter, and just things that are there, and it'll burn it all. And you think, well, what does that do? Well, it actually clears everything out, and it's really cool. It'll clear everything out and reintroduce that, and within a couple weeks, it will start regrowing fresh, and it will introduce, actually more animals will come back to that area because there's a fresh ecosystem that is growing and promotes growth, and it's so important to do that. And I think this is where it's super important in our lives to do prescribed burning. If you are experiencing mental wildfires, it may be time that you prescribe yourself a burning. And what does that look like? Okay, maybe it's a pile burning. So what does that look like? Maybe you're compiling a list of all the things that are distractions to actually what you want. So what do you want in life? I want to be successful. Okay, what does that take? What are you doing right now to be successful at what you want? Well, I want to earn this much money. Okay, what are you doing right now to set yourself up to make that much money? Of course, you may not make it overnight, but what can you do today to better your chances in the future? And compile a list of all the things. Maybe you're just wasting a bunch of time playing video games. Maybe you're wasting a bunch of time drinking or going out. Maybe you're wasting a lot of money drinking and going out or spending money on weed, whatever it might be. I mean, you can literally substitute it for anything. And I'm not trying to call anybody out. I'm just thinking of distractions. So maybe it's time-consuming apps, right? I spend so much time on Instagram. I spend so much time on TikTok. Maybe it's time to make a list and then limit yourself on that. Okay, I'm giving myself 30 minutes and that's it of all of these things. Maybe I'm giving myself 1 hour to hang out with my friends in Discord and that's it. Whatever it might be, that would be like considered a mental pile burning. Broadcast burning is a little bit more broad and it's a little bit more difficult to do because I think it involves more discipline. And this is where you've got to be honest with yourself, right? You've got to be really honest with yourself and say, I've got dead trees here. I've got dead relationships that I've never actually dealt with, and I need to actually deal with them. And maybe that does mean going to therapy and getting some help and being able to talk to somebody about it and say, hey, look, I've never actually gotten over the fact that my brother said this to me when I was younger, or maybe I've never been able to get over the fact that I don't have a great relationship with my mom, or maybe I don't have a great relationship with my dad, or maybe I am just in a bad place because honestly, I'm still looking at my first relationship I ever had and how that ended really impacted the way I look at relationships, period. And the other thing is maybe it's time to get rid of things, right? And limit those things. So instead of going out on a Saturday night, all your friends, hey, let's go out on a Saturday night. And you say, no, I've got an interview on Monday, or I really have this cool project that I'm working on Monday. I want to make sure that I rest on Sunday. Oh yeah, that's on Sunday. Come out on Saturday. You can rest on Sunday. No, I want to actually go through like my notes on Sunday. Like you need people in your life who are going to say, yeah, we can go out for a little while and then we'll go home early. We'll get brunch on Sunday and then we'll go through those interview questions. That way you're really prepared for Monday. Like you want people in your life that are like that. So it's all about evaluating and prioritizing about what and who are important to you, right? Who is important to you? Maybe some of those friends may not be as important because they're great people. And I'm not saying that you burn a bridge. I'm not saying that you ever burn people. You never, ever, ever, ever burn people. You can burn a boat. You can choose what you can control. And oftentimes, I hear people all the time, if they don't match my energy, I'm cutting them out. That is such a selfish and lonely and non-beneficial mentality. Because what happens is if you cut somebody out, every single person is different. And they all have different energy. And they all have different moments. And you know what? They just might not be in season. Just because their plant and their flowers don't grow or bloom when yours do, that doesn't mean you have to cut them out. Be grace-filled and give them the opportunity to actually grow around you as well. Now, if they're always bringing gasoline to a bonfire, you may say, look, I don't want you coming around here, or I'm not going to be around you as much. But it doesn't mean that you burn that bridge and say, nah, you're terrible and I'm cutting you out completely. And I really think that that's going to help you determine and do some new things in life, right? Because the greatest lie that we ever tell ourselves is that we can get somewhere new while continuing to do the same things we have always done. And maybe it's time that you prescribe a burning and burn some things out of your life, burn some memories, and say, you know what? I don't need this anymore. I'm moving forward into the future. That's going to do it for this conversation. If you want to follow me on social media, you can find me on Instagram. That's at Kyle_Vaught, V as in Victor, ATT. If you want to find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, it's at Kyle Vaught. You can also, if you're watching on YouTube, please make sure that you like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Comment below if you would like. Also, if you're watching or listening on the Spotify, I don't know why I just blinked on that, Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure that you follow the podcast. I really appreciate it. I also really appreciate all the engagement on social media as well. I really appreciate you listening each and every week. There's a lot more to come. I can't wait to share on Thursday. There's some new things happening in my life. But until then, remember to give grace, show love, and as always, stay stellar. Peace.